the massive orbital trading station of Haven Point drifted silently through the void between three stellar empires, serving as neutral territory, where dozens of alien species conducted business diplomacy and the countless small interactions that kept galactic civilization functioning properly across vast distances in complex political relationships. The station rotated slowly, generating artificial gravity that allowed beings from high-gravity worlds to walk comfortably alongside. Those evolved in lighter environments, creating a unique melting pot of cultures, technologies, and philosophies that represented the best aspects of interspecies cooperation. Captain David Kane stepped through the airlock of his freight hauler, the Wandering Star, after completing another successful cargo run between the human colonies and the alien markets that dotted this sector of space. It's like jewels scattered across the cosmic void. At 38 years old, David had spent nearly 2 decades moving goods across the galaxy and had learned to appreciate both the opportunities and dangers that came with operating on the frontier, where 3 different empires maintained an uneasy peace through careful diplomacy and mutual economic interests that sometimes conflicted with their political objectives. The docking bay buzzed with activity as beings from across the galaxy loaded and unloaded cargo from ships of every conceivable design, representing the incredible diversity of engineering approaches that different species had developed over millions of years of technological evolution. Towering Corvin freighters sat beside sleek Altarian diplomatic vessels, while small human traders like David's ship occupied the spaces between the giants of interstellar commerce, creating a tableau that never failed to impress visitors with its demonstration of peaceful coexistence. David made his way through the commercial district toward the entertainment sector, where he planned to spend his shore leave relaxing and enjoying the unique atmosphere that only Haven Point could provide to travelers who had spent weeks or months isolated in the depths of space. The station had evolved over the decades into something approaching a small city with residential districts, commercial zones, and entertainment areas that catered to the needs of visitors from hundreds of different worlds and dozens of species, each with their own requirements and preferences. The journey through the station corridors provided David with opportunities to observe the incredible variety of beings who called Haven Point home, either permanently or temporarily, while conducting their business throughout this sector of the galaxy. The architectural design accommodated multiple gravities, atmospheric compositions, and lighting requirements, creating spaces that felt welcoming to virtually any form of intelligent life that might visit or reside there. The Starlight Cantina was one of David's favorite establishments on Haven Point because it maintained a reputation for serving excellent food and drinks, while welcoming beings from all species without discrimination or prejudice based on their biological origins or cultural backgrounds. The owner was a retired colony trader who had invested his profits in creating a place where travelers could find comfort, companionship, and a taste of home. Regardless of how far they had journeyed from their birth worlds, the cantina interior reflected its multicultural clientele with design elements borrowed from dozens of different architectural traditions, seamlessly integrated into a cohesive whole that felt familiar to beings from virtually any species. The lighting could be adjusted to accommodate various visual systems, while atmospheric composition could be modified to ensure comfort for different respiratory requirements, creating an environment where anyone could feel at ease. As David entered the cantina, he noticed the usual mix of patrons representing the incredible diversity of galactic civilization that had gathered on Haven Point to conduct business, pursue opportunities, or simply seek refuge from the pressures and conflicts that plagued their homeworlds. Traders, diplomats, tourists, and refugees sat at tables throughout the establishment, sharing meals, stories, and the bonds that developed between beings who found themselves far from home in a universe that could be both wondrous and dangerous. The evening crowd included representatives from at least a dozen different species engaged in conversations that ranged from casual social interaction to serious business negotiations that could affect the economies of entire star systems. The universal translator networks ensured that language barriers did not prevent communication while cultural exchange. Protocols helped minimize misunderstandings that might arise from different social customs and behavioral expectations. David settled at his usual table near the observation window that provided a spectacular view of the gas giant Nexus 7 and its 17 moons, creating a celestial display that reminded all observers of the vastness and beauty of the universe they inhabited. The sight never failed to inspire contemplation about the remarkable achievement that galactic civilization represented and the cooperation required to maintain peace and prosperity. Across such enormous distances, the server who approached David, Tabo, was a young Altarian female who had been working at the cantina for several months. While studying interspecies relations at the local academic institute, her friendly demeanor and genuine interest in the diverse customers made her popular among the regular patrons, who appreciated her efforts to learn about their cultures and accommodate their preferences. David ordered his usual meal of grilled protein with native vegetables while selecting a bottle of Terran wine that would complement the flavors while providing relaxation after the stresses of his recent cargo run. The food at the Starlight Cantina was consistently excellent because the kitchen staff included representatives from multiple species who could prepare dishes that appealed to a wide variety of tastes and dietary requirements. The evening proceeded peacefully as David enjoyed his meal and observed the other patrons while mentally planning his cargo run through the frontier territories, where human expansion was opening new markets and opportunities for independent traders willing to accept the risks associated with operating in regions where political stability could not be guaranteed. Several promising contracts awaited his consideration, including one that would take him to recently established colonies that needed supplies and equipment. The atmosphere in the cantina was relaxed and convivial as beings from different worlds shared their experiences and formed the temporary alliances and friendships that made long-distance space travel more bearable for those who spent much of their lives isolated from their own species. The establishment served as an informal embassy, where cultural exchange occurred naturally through casual interaction and mutual curiosity about different ways of life. David had been reviewing potential cargo manifests on his portable computer, while enjoying his wine when he became aware of a disturbance near the main entrance, where 3 large Corvan security guards had entered and were scanning the crowd with the methodical attention that characterized their species' approach to law enforcement and public order maintenance. The Corvans were known throughout the galaxy for their size, strength, and rigid adherence to rules and regulations that govern commercial establishments and social interactions. The Corvan species had evolved on a world with high gravity and constant environmental challenges that had produced beings who were naturally large and powerful, with a cultural emphasis on duty, discipline, and adherence to established authority structures that maintained order and stability. These characteristics made them effective security personnel throughout the galaxy, but sometimes led to inflexibility when dealing with situations that required compassion or creative problem-solving approaches. David watched with growing interest as the guards made their way through the cantina toward a corner table, where an elderly alien sat alone nursing what appeared to be a single drink that he had been making last for quite some time based on the way he occasionally sipped from it with careful deliberation. The being appeared to be Therian based on his silver fur and the distinctive facial features that characterized that ancient and scholarly species. The Therian species had a long and distinguished history as one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, with cultural traditions emphasizing learning, wisdom, and philosophical inquiry that had produced some of the most respected scholars and teachers known to galactic society. However, their homeworld had been destroyed in a cosmic catastrophe several decades earlier, leaving the survivors scattered across the galaxy as refugees struggling to maintain their cultural identity while adapting to life among alien species. The lead guard approached the elderly Therian table and spoke in the harsh tones that the Corvan language was known for throughout the galaxy, while his companions positioned themselves strategically to prevent any attempt at escape or evasion. David, Universal Translator, picked up enough of the conversation to understand that they were demanding payment for services and threatening ejection if immediate. Compliance was not forthcoming. "You have occupied this table for over 3 hours. Without ordering additional refreshments," the guard announced, while his companions flanked the table in a manner designed to intimidate and establish dominance over the situation. The management requires payment of your outstanding debt or immediate departure from the premises, according to station regulations and commercial establishment policies. The elderly Therian looked up at the guards with obvious distress but maintained his dignity, despite the embarrassing nature of his situation and the public attention that their confrontation was attracting from other patrons throughout the cantina. I understand your position and the requirements of your establishment, but I currently lack the financial resources to pay for anything beyond this single drink. If you will permit me to finish it, I will leave peacefully and not return until my circumstances improve sufficiently. David found himself standing before he had consciously decided to intervene in this situation. Unfolding before him as something about the elderly alien dignity in the face of humiliation reminded him powerfully of his own grandfather, who had maintained his pride during difficult times when the family mining operation had faced financial challenges that threatened their survival. The sight of someone being forced to leave an establishment due to poverty triggered protective instincts that David had inherited from generations of humans who had learned to help their neighbors during times of crisis. The Therian clothing was worn but clean, suggesting that he maintained his personal standards despite his obvious financial difficulties, while his posture and manner indicated education and refinement that spoke to a background of privilege and respect that made his current circumstances all the more poignant. The contrast between his evident dignity and his desperate situation created a tableau that demanded intervention from anyone with the means and inclination to help. "Wait a moment," David called out as he approached the group while keeping his movements slow and non-threatening to avoid escalating the tension that was already building around the corner table. "I could not help but overhear your conversation, and I would like to make a proposal that might resolve this situation to everyone's satisfaction without unpleasantness or embarrassment for anyone involved." The lead guard turned his attention to David with suspicion clearly visible in his expression as he tried to assess whether the human represented a threat to their authority or simply another customer who would eventually mind his own business once the seriousness of the situation was explained. "What kind of proposal, human, and why do you involve yourself in matters that do not concern you or affect your interests in any way?" Whatsoever, David reached into his jacket and withdrew his credit chip while maintaining eye contact with the guard, to demonstrate his peaceful intentions and his respect for their authority, while also showing that he possessed the means to back up whatever proposal he was about to make. "I would like to pay this gentleman tab and any additional expenses he might incur this evening. I am also prepared to cover any outstanding debts from previous visits to this establishment." The elderly Therian stared at David with obvious confusion about why a complete stranger would offer such generosity without any apparent expectation of reward or compensation for what represented a significant financial expenditure on behalf of someone he had never met before. The guards exchanged glances as they tried to understand what the human hoped to gain from his unexpected intervention in what should have been a straightforward debt collection matter. "Human, you do not understand the full extent of this individual." "Debts," the guard replied, while consulting a device that apparently tracked customer accounts and payment histories for the establishment management. "The total amount, including extended table occupancy, multiple visits without adequate payment, and accumulated service charges, is 630 credits. This is a substantial sum that represents significant value even for someone of apparent means." David checked his credit chip balance and nodded approvingly as he confirmed that he possessed sufficient funds to cover the debt without causing himself serious financial hardship. 630 credits was indeed substantial, but his recent cargo runs had been profitable, and he could afford the expense as an act of kindness towards someone clearly in desperate need of assistance. "That amount is acceptable," David said, while authorizing the transfer of funds through the secure financial networks that connected all major establishments on Haven Point to the galactic banking systems. "I'm also adding an additional 400 credits to ensure this gentleman can enjoy proper hospitality during his stay on the station without worrying about his ability to pay for basic necessities." The guard seemed taken aback by David's willingness to pay such a large amount for someone he had never met before, and whose background and circumstances were completely unknown to him. They verified that the payment had been received improperly. credited to the establishment accounts before reluctantly stepping back from the table while clearly disappointed at being denied the opportunity to exercise their authority in ejecting a non-paying customer. The financial transaction was processed quickly through the automated systems that governed commercial activity throughout Haven Point, but the psychological impact of David's intervention took longer to register among the various participants and witnesses to the situation. The guards had been prepared for resistance negotiation or attempted evasion, but had not anticipated that a stranger would simply pay the debt without question or condition. "The matter is resolved," the lead guard announced with obvious reluctance, in disappointment at being denied the satisfaction of forcibly removing someone from the premises, which would have provided a demonstration of their authority and effectiveness. "However, we will continue monitoring this individual's future behavior to ensure compliance with establishment policies and station regulations." As the guards departed with their authority, somewhat diminished by the peaceful resolution of what they had expected to be a confrontational situation, the elderly Therian remained seated at his table with an expression of bewilderment and gratitude that seemed to overwhelm his ability to speak coherently or process what had just occurred. David gestured toward the empty chair at the table and asked permission to join him for what he hoped would be an extended conversation. "Please allow me to introduce myself," David said, while extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting as he settled into the chair across from the elderly alien. "I am David Kane, and I work as an independent freight hauler, carrying cargo between various worlds in this sector of the galaxy. I hope you will not mind if I join you for dinner and perhaps some conversation about your travels and experiences throughout your obviously extensive lifetime." The elderly Therian carefully grasped David's hand in the manner he had observed humans use for formal introductions during his years of studying different species and their social customs. "My name is Elder Marcus, and I am deeply grateful for your unexpected kindness and generosity. However, I must confess that I do not understand why you would spend so much money to help someone you have never met before and know nothing about." David considered how to explain his motivations in a way that would make sense to someone from a different cultural background who might not share human values regarding mutual assistance and care for strangers in need. "Honestly, I am not certain I can provide a completely rational explanation that would satisfy someone approaching such situations from a purely logical perspective. I saw someone in need and I was in a position to help. Sometimes that seems like reason enough for action." Elder Marcus studied David's face as if trying to read the sincerity behind his words while struggling to understand concepts that might not exist in his own cultural framework or that might be interpreted differently by a species with different evolutionary history and social development. "In my experience, most beings throughout the galaxy act primarily from self-interest and expect some form of compensation for their assistance, whether immediate or delayed. Your behavior does not match the patterns I have observed during many years of travel throughout known space." The server approached their table, and David ordered a substantial meal for both of them, along with drinks that would complement the food while providing opportunity for extended conversation between two beings who were just beginning to discover what they might have in common despite their obvious differences in species and background. The ordering process gave David time to think about how to explain human motivations and values to someone who might not have encountered them before. "Perhaps it would help if I told you something about my background and the experiences that shaped my understanding of how beings should treat each other," David said while settling back in his chair and preparing for what he hoped would be a lengthy and rewarding conversation. "I grew up on a frontier world where communities were small and survival often depended on neighbors helping each other during difficult times without expectation of immediate compensation. When someone faced trouble, whether from equipment failure, environmental disasters, or economic hardship, the entire community would assist without expecting anything in return because everyone understood they might need similar help someday, and that cooperation was essential for survival in hostile environments. This created cultural values emphasizing mutual assistance even between strangers who had no obvious connection or shared interests." Elder Marcus leaned forward with obvious interest in learning more about human social structures and the evolutionary factors that had shaped their approach to community, cooperation, and mutual assistance. "This community cooperation you describe sounds like an evolutionary adaptation that ensures group survival even when individual members face temporary difficulties that could threaten their ability to contribute to collective welfare and security. That may be part of it, David agreed, while appreciating the scholarly perspective that Elder Marcus brought to their discussion of human social evolution and cultural development. I think there is something more fundamental involved beyond simple survival advantages or group preservation mechanisms. Humans seem to derive genuine satisfaction from helping others that goes beyond calculations of future benefit or reciprocal obligations. We feel good when we can make someone else's life easier or more pleasant, even when there is no possibility of receiving anything in return for our assistance. This suggests that helping others serves psychological needs that are independent of practical considerations or social expectations about appropriate behavior in various circumstances. The food arrived and proved excellent. As David had expected, from previous visits to the Starlight Cantina, which maintained high standards for cuisine that could appeal to the diverse tastes and dietary requirements of its multicultural clientele. As they ate, Elder Marcus began sharing his story of being a refugee whose homeworld had been destroyed in a cosmic catastrophe decades earlier, leaving the survivors scattered across the galaxy, struggling to maintain their cultural identity. Elder Marcus had been a respected academic on his homeworld, specializing in comparative cultural studies and interspecies relations with particular emphasis on understanding the factors that promoted peaceful coexistence between different civilizations. However, his scholarly credentials and accumulated knowledge meant little in his new circumstances, where survival required practical skills and commercial value rather than academic knowledge and intellectual achievement. The destruction of the Therian homeworld had been sudden and complete when their star underwent an unexpected phase transition that rendered the inhabitable planet uninhabitable within a matter of months. The evacuation had been chaotic, with survivors fleeing in whatever ships were available, carrying only what they could transport in their desperate escape from a dying world. The refugee experience had been particularly traumatic for older Therians, like Elder Marcus, who had spent their lives accumulating knowledge and building academic reputations that became meaningless when faced with the practical demands of survival in unfamiliar environments among alien species who did not value their expertise or understand their cultural background. Your research sounds fascinating, David said, while genuinely interested in the work that had occupied Elder Marcus for so many years of his life. Have you been able to continue your studies despite the challenges you have faced, or have practical survival needs made it difficult to maintain your academic focus and pursue your research objectives? Elder Marcus's expression brightened considerably as he realized David was genuinely interested in his work rather than simply making polite conversation to fill time during their meal. I have managed to continue my observations and analysis, though I lack the resources to publish my findings or share them with other scholars who might benefit from the insights I have gained through decades of field research across multiple worlds and civilizations. The conversation continued throughout the evening as David learned about Elder Marcus's extensive travels and his detailed observations of how different species approached fundamental questions about cooperation, competition, and social organization that determined the character and stability of their civilizations. The Therian scholar had developed fascinating theories about the evolutionary and environmental factors that shaped different approaches to interspecies relations and cultural development. According to Elder Marcus's research, humans were highly unusual among galactic species for their willingness to help strangers, without obvious expectation of direct compensation or future benefit from their actions. Most species he had studied showed strong preferences for helping members of their own groups while being suspicious or indifferent toward outsiders, who might compete for resources or represent potential threats to their security and prosperity. The human tendency to extend assistance beyond their immediate family or tribal groups appeared to be related to their evolutionary development on a world where environmental challenges required extensive cooperation between different groups, who might otherwise compete with each other for limited resources and territory. This had created cultural values that emphasized mutual assistance even between strangers who had no obvious connection or shared interests. The environmental conditions on Earth that had shaped human social evolution included frequent natural disasters that required large-scale coordinated responses from multiple communities. Working together despite their normal competitive relationships, the species that had learned to cooperate effectively during these crises had survived and thrived, while those that remained focused solely on their own immediate interests had often perished during particularly severe challenges. As the evening progressed, David found himself genuinely enjoying the conversation with Elder Marcus, whose scholarly perspective provided fascinating insights into human behavior and cultural development that he had never considered before in his years of interacting with diverse species throughout the galaxy. The old Therian's obvious intelligence and extensive knowledge made him an engaging companion, despite his current financial difficulties and uncertain future prospects. The academic analysis that Elder Marcus provided helped David understand his own actions and motivations in ways that he had never considered before, as the scholar explained that human behavior patterns often reflected evolutionary adaptations that had enabled their species to survive and thrive in challenging environments, where cooperation and mutual assistance were essential for long-term success. When the cantina began closing for the evening, David realized that Elder Marcus would need somewhere to stay, and probably lacked the resources to afford proper accommodations on Haven Point, where the lodging facilities were expensive and designed primarily for prosperous traders and travelers, rather than refugees who were struggling financially to meet their basic needs. The station lodging facilities charged premium rates that reflected their location in neutral territory and their high-quality amenities designed to accommodate the diverse requirements of visitors from hundreds of different worlds with varying physiological needs and cultural preferences. The costs were beyond the reach of most refugees and displaced persons who found themselves stranded on the station without adequate financial resources. Elder Marcus, if you do not mind my asking, do you have somewhere to stay tonight? David inquired, while trying to approach the subject diplomatically and without causing additional embarrassment to someone who had already suffered enough humiliation for one evening. I could not help but notice that your current circumstances might make it difficult to afford the standard lodging rates on Haven Point, which are notoriously expensive, even for successful traders and business travelers. The elderly Therian hesitated before answering, as if embarrassed by his need to admit his desperate financial situation to someone who had already shown him considerable kindness and might not want to become further involved in his problems or take on additional responsibilities for his welfare. I have been sleeping in the public areas of the station where security allows it, when they are not conducting their routine patrols and safety inspections. The lodging facilities are beyond my current means, and I have been hoping to find employment that would allow me to improve my circumstances and regain some measure of financial stability and independence. However, my academic background does not translate well to the practical skills that most employers require for the positions available to someone in my situation. David made a decision that felt natural despite the fact that he barely knew Elder Marcus and had no way of predicting whether his continued assistance would be appreciated or taken advantage of by someone who might have ulterior motives or unrealistic expectations about ongoing support. I have a ship with comfortable guest quarters that are currently unoccupied and available for visitors. You would be welcome to stay there while you look for work or make other arrangements for your future. The accommodations include all necessary amenities and access to communication systems that might help you continue your research or establish contact with potential employers or academic institutions that might value your expertise. The offer clearly surprised Elder Marcus, who stared at David with an expression that suggested he was having difficulty processing such an unexpected extension of generosity from someone he had only met hours earlier and who had no obvious reason to continue helping him beyond basic humanitarian concerns. Captain Kane, I am deeply moved by your kindness, but I cannot impose upon your hospitality without being able to offer something in return for such generous accommodation and assistance. What would you ask of me in exchange for such an arrangement that would allow me to maintain my dignity while accepting your help during this difficult period in my life? I have little of material value to offer, but perhaps my knowledge and experience might be of some use to someone engaged in interstellar commerce and trade. David recognized Elder Marcus' need to maintain his dignity and sense of self-worth while accepting assistance that he desperately needed for his survival and basic welfare. Perhaps you could share some of your research and observations about different species and cultures with me during your stay aboard my ship? I have always been curious about such topics, but have never had the opportunity to discuss them with a real expert in the field, who has spent decades studying these important subjects. The proposal seemed to provide Elder Marcus with a way to accept the offered assistance while maintaining his scholarly dignity and contributing something of genuine value in return for the hospitality he was being offered. I would be honored to share my knowledge with someone who shows genuine interest in understanding the complexities of interspecies relations and cultural development. Your kindness deserves whatever insights I can provide from my years of research and observation throughout the galaxy. They made their way through the quieter corridors of Haven. Point toward the docking area where David's ship was berthed among dozens of other vessels, ranging from small personal craft to massive cargo haulers that served the commercial needs of the trading station and its diverse population of permanent residents and temporary visitors. The Wandering Star was a medium-sized freight hauler that David had modified over his years of ownership to provide comfortable living quarters, along with the cargo capacity needed for his business operations throughout this sector of the galaxy. The ship had been purchased used from a retiring trader who had maintained it well, but had not invested in the kind of improvements that David had gradually implemented. The modifications included enhanced life support systems, better quarters for passengers and crew, upgraded cargo handling equipment that made loading and unloading more efficient and improved navigation systems that allowed for more precise routing through the complex trade networks that connected different worlds and civilizations throughout the galaxy. The guest quarters on David's ship were simple but comfortable, with all the amenities that Elder Marcus would need for an extended stay, including access to the ship communication systems and data libraries that might help him continue his research work while enjoying the security and comfort of proper accommodation. David showed him how to operate the various systems while ensuring that he understood he was welcome to use whatever resources the ship provided. The data libraries on the Wandering Star contained extensive information about different species, cultures, trade relationships, and political developments throughout the galaxy that David had accumulated during his years of traveling between different worlds and establishing business relationships with clients from dozens of different civilizations. The collection included both official reports and personal observations that could provide valuable context for Elder Marcus's ongoing research. Over the following days, Elder Marcus proved to be a fascinating companion whose extensive knowledge and scholarly perspective enriched David's understanding of the galaxy and its diverse inhabitants in ways that formal education and commercial experience had never provided to someone primarily focused on practical concerns rather than academic inquiry. The Therian had accumulated decades of observations about how different species approached fundamental questions about cooperation, competition, and mutual assistance that shaped their civilizations and determined their success or failure in building stable, prosperous societies capable of surviving the challenges that faced all intelligent life in a dangerous universe. The research that Elder Marcus shared with David included detailed analyses of the cultural and biological factors that influenced different species' approaches to trade diplomacy and conflict resolution, along with insights into the environmental and evolutionary pressures that had shaped their development over millions of years of biological and social evolution. His insights proved valuable for David's own work as a freight hauler, who had to navigate the complex political and cultural relationships between different worlds and civilizations, while building trust and maintaining profitable business relationships with clients who had very different expectations in communication, styles based on their species' characteristics and cultural backgrounds. Elder Marcus also proved helpful in other practical ways, as his knowledge of different species, customs, and languages made him valuable for negotiating cargo contracts and resolving misunderstandings that arose during David's business dealings with alien clients who sometimes had difficulty understanding human motivations and business practices. The old scholar's ability to communicate effectively with diverse species and his deep understanding of their psychological and cultural characteristics made him an asset rather than a burden during commercial negotiations, and helped David avoid potential conflicts that could have damaged his reputation or cost him valuable business opportunities. The partnership that developed between David and Elder Marcus was mutually beneficial, as the human gained access to scholarly insights that improved his effectiveness as a trader, while the Therian gained security and resources that allowed him to continue his research work without the constant worry about basic survival needs that had been consuming his time and energy. Their relationship demonstrated the potential for cooperation between different species. When mutual respect and understanding existed, along with willingness to recognize and value the contributions that each individual could make regardless of their current circumstances or apparent limitations, word of David's kindness toward Elder Marcus spread throughout the trading community on Haven Point, as other travelers learned about the human who had paid substantial debts for a stranger and provided ongoing assistance without expecting anything in return from someone he had never met before and knew nothing about. The story attracted attention from beings who were impressed by such unusual generosity and wanted to understand the motivations behind behavior that seemed to contradict the normal patterns of self-interested action that characterized most commercial and social interactions between members of different species throughout the galaxy. The attention that David received was not always positive, as some individuals suspected that his assistance to Elder Marcus must be motivated by hidden agendas or expectations of future compensation that had not been made explicit during their initial encounter. The concept of genuine altruism without expectation of direct benefit was apparently difficult for some species to understand, or accept based on their own cultural values and evolutionary development. However, the majority of responses were positive, as beings from various species expressed admiration for David's actions and interest in learning more about human cultural values that produced such behavior patterns. Several alien traders began approaching David with business opportunities that they might not have offered to someone they did not respect and trust based on demonstrated character rather than purely commercial considerations. Elder Marcus research into David's behavior and motivations became a detailed case study that supported his broader theories about human social evolution and cultural development. The Therian scholar found that David's actions were consistent with patterns he had observed in other humans, but were unusual among most galactic species he had studied during his decades of field research throughout known space. The economic benefits that resulted from David's enhanced reputation in the trading community more than compensated for the credits he had spent helping Elder Marcus and providing him with accommodation and ongoing support. His business expanded significantly as alien clients who respected his character began offering him more lucrative cargo, contracts, and exclusive trading opportunities that were only available to operators with proven integrity. The relationship between David and Elder Marcus also attracted the attention of academic institutions throughout the galaxy that were interested in Elder Marcus research and willing to provide funding for his continued work in exchange for access to his accumulated knowledge and ongoing observations about interspecies relations and cultural development. Several prestigious universities offered the Therian scholar positions that would allow him to resume his academic career while providing the financial security and institutional support that would enable him to publish his findings and share his insights with other researchers working in related fields throughout the galaxy. Elder Marcus faced a difficult decision about whether to accept the academic opportunities that would separate him from David or continue their partnership, which had proven beneficial for both of them in different ways. The choice represented a conflict between his desire for scholarly recognition and his appreciation for the friendship and mutual support they had developed. The decision was complicated by his genuine affection for David and his gratitude for the kindness that had rescued him from desperate circumstances, while providing him with the first real stability and security he had experienced since the destruction of his homeworld decades earlier. David encouraged Elder Marcus to pursue the academic opportunities while offering to maintain their friendship and collaboration regardless of where the Therian scholar chose to establish himself professionally. Human understanding that their partnership should not limit Elder Marcus. KO opportunities for professional advancement demonstrated the depth of his commitment to his friend welfare over his own convenience or interests. Elder Marcus ultimately chose to accept a position at the prestigious Galactic Institute for Comparative Cultural Studies while maintaining his collaboration with David. Through regular communication and periodic visits when their schedules and responsibilities allowed such meetings, the arrangement allowed him to resume his academic career while preserving the friendship that had developed from their initial encounter in the cantina. The research that Elder Marcus published about human cultural values and their implications for interspecies relations attracted significant attention from scholars throughout the galaxy, who were interested in understanding the factors that promoted successful cooperation between different civilizations, despite their biological and cultural differences. His work provided new insights into why humans had been so successful at establishing cooperative relationships with diverse alien species, and suggested that human approaches to mutual assistance and cultural understanding could serve as models for improving relations between other species that had historically experienced conflict or mutual suspicion. The academic recognition that Elder Marcus received for his research included awards and honors that acknowledged his contributions to understanding interspecies relations and cultural development, along with funding for expanded research programs that would allow him to continue his work on a larger scale with access to resources and collaborators throughout the galaxy. The success of his scholarly work validated his decision to continue his research despite the financial hardships and personal difficulties he had endured as a refugee, while also demonstrating the value of the insights he had gained through his unique experiences and observations. David continued his work as a freight hauler while maintaining his friendship with Elder Marcus and applying the insights he had gained from their collaboration to improve his own effectiveness as a trader and informal diplomat in his dealings with diverse alien clients throughout the sector. His reputation for fairness, integrity, and cultural sensitivity made him one of the most respected, independent operators in the region, while his business continued to prosper as more clients sought his services based on recommendations from satisfied customers who valued his ethical approach to commerce. The story of David's intervention to help Elder Marcus became part of the folklore of Haven Point, where it was told and retold as an example of the unexpected kindness that could emerge from chance encounters between strangers from different species who might otherwise have remained unconnected. The tale inspired other acts of generosity and mutual assistance among the diverse population of the trading station, as beings who heard the story began looking for opportunities to help others in need while building the kinds of relationships that made Haven Point a more welcoming and supportive community for all its inhabitants. Years later, when David was asked about his decision to help Elder Marcus, he always emphasized that the choice had felt natural rather than calculated, and that the benefits he had received from their friendship far exceeded the initial financial cost of his assistance. His actions demonstrated the human capacity for spontaneous kindness toward strangers that could transcend species boundaries and create meaningful relationships based on mutual respect and shared values, rather than superficial similarities or temporary convenience. Elder Marcus's eventual appointment as Director of Interspecies Cultural Studies at the Galactic Institute represented the pinnacle of his academic career and provided him with the resources and institutional support necessary to continue his research on a scale that would have been impossible without the initial assistance he had received from David. His success validated the human investment in his potential while demonstrating the long-term benefits that could result from simple acts of kindness and mutual support between beings from different species and backgrounds. The educational programs that Elder Marcus developed at the Galactic Institute incorporated lessons learned from his experiences with David and other humans about the importance of cross-cultural understanding and mutual assistance in building stable interspecies relationships that could withstand the pressures and challenges of galactic civilization. His curriculum influenced a generation of diplomats and traders who carried these values into their professional work while helping to create a more cooperative and understanding approach to interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. The research foundation that Elder Marcus established with funding from his academic success provided grants and support for other scholars who were studying interspecies relations and cultural development throughout known space. The foundation ensured that his work would continue to influence understanding of these important topics for years to come while supporting new generations of researchers. David business continued to prosper as his reputation for integrity and Cultural sensitivity attracted clients from throughout the galaxy who valued his ability to navigate complex interspecies relationships while maintaining the trust and respect of all parties involved in his trading operations and commercial negotiations. His success demonstrated that principled business practices could be both profitable and personally satisfying. When consistently applied over time while building the kinds of relationships that created lasting value for all participants in commercial transactions, the friendship between David and Elder Marcus served as a model for other human-alien relationships that developed throughout the sector, as their example demonstrated the potential for genuine cooperation and mutual support between beings from different species and cultural backgrounds. When trust and respect were established, their relationship influenced broader patterns of interaction between humans and other species throughout the region, as more beings began approaching cross-cultural relationships with openness and willingness to learn from each other rather than maintaining the suspicion and distance that had historically characterized many interspecies interactions. The economic development that resulted from improved interspecies relations in the sector contributed to prosperity and stability that benefited all inhabitants regardless of their species or homeworld origins. The cooperation that David and Elder Marcus had demonstrated on a personal level helped create an atmosphere of trust and mutual support that facilitated larger-scale diplomatic and commercial relationships. The cultural exchange programs that grew from Elder Marcus's research brought together students and scholars from different species to study comparative cultural development and interspecies relations in controlled academic environments. 8. Programs promoted understanding and cooperation, while training future leaders in diplomacy and trade, who would shape the next generation of interspecies relationships throughout the galaxy. David's eventual marriage to a human trader who shared his values and interests created a family that embodied the principles of cooperation and mutual assistance that had guided his relationship with Elder Marcus from their first meeting in the cantina. Their children grew up understanding the importance of treating all beings with respect and dignity regardless of their species background or circumstances. The trading company that David established with his wife became one of the most successful and respected businesses in the sector, known throughout the region for its ethical practices and commitment to fair dealing with clients from all species and civilizations. The company's success demonstrated that principled business practices could be profitable, as well as morally satisfying when consistently applied over time.